Happy Sabbath, everybody. One more time, like we woke up on the right side of the bed. Happy Sabbath. My name is Angel Nyakundi, for those of you that don't know. I'm reminding myself to breathe right now because I'm so nervous, I can't lie. I don't do things like this often, but I even practice in front of a video audience because I was like, if I can perform or speak in front of the Grammys, then I can do it at church. But I'm so thankful to have my support system here today. I have my mom and my dad and my brother Hayden right here. My friends are here, Dazel, Tony, Darnell, Celine, as well as my aunties, Auntie Becky, Auntie Alice, her daughters, Auntie Bianca. I also want to take some time to thank my mentors, Miss Lydia Tate and Dr. Maria. And although Pastor Obinchu isn't here today, I do appreciate the honor for being led at the podium today. So thank you all for gathering to hear what I have to say today. So the theme for today is the teacher in our final breath, and we're just going to be exploring a little bit about the journey to living fully. But for the first few minutes, I kind of want to make this a little bit more interactive. So if we could go to the next slide, I'll just show y'all this picture here. I just want y'all to take a few moments to kind of ponder on what it is that you see. Some of you may have already seen this picture before, but yeah, just ponder on anything that is at all, and then I'll call some people out just to have a little conversation. Okay, do I have any answers at all for like what it is they see? I might call CJ. Perspective, yes, I agree, for sure. Tony, anything at all? I mean, look at their facial expressions, or like, let's look at them being outside or where their environment is. Yes, that's exactly right. Those are both correct answers. So I just kind of wanted to start off with this picture just to introduce the importance and significance of perspective. As we can see here, both of these people share the same belief system and have the same perspective that life has no meaning. And on the left side, we see a man who just appears to be very sad and melancholy and gloomy. He's looking towards the dirty rocks. He just seems very in his head and to have an overall very negative outlook on life. Whereas the person on the right seems to be very happy and hopeful. They're looking at the sun and all the landscapes, they're beaming. And so the thing is that both of these people are experiencing the same outside reality. They're both on the same bus. They're both seeing the same things outside, going through the same thing, but they're experiencing two different internal realities because of their own perspective. So the sad person in this photo might see life has no meaning and their belief system, they'll internalize that. So they'll start thinking things like maybe everything happens to me instead of for me. The world is against me, coming from a lack or a victim type of mindset. Whereas the happy person might see life has no meaning as like, you know what, I make the meaning for life myself. So there's no point in overly stressing or like just sitting there and overanalyzing everything, because at the end of the day, they get to go out there and they can be joyful and they can laugh and they can just be thankful and practice gratitude. So I wanted to start with this just so we can show the importance of perspective, because we're going to get into that a little bit later. And then we'll go to the next slide. All right, so just a little introduction. We're going to be exploring a topic that I feel like many people tend to avoid, which is death. And I mean, maybe some of y'all might be thinking, like, what is it that I could have to say about something like this? Or somebody my age, what could I know about a topic so heavy? The truth is that when I spoke last year during the afternoon service, I did want to speak about this as well whenever I was reading the book about it. However, I felt that it needed an entirely different moment to touch upon. And I think that death as a whole is often brushed aside, or people tend to avoid it like the plague. And so it just makes people uncomfortable a lot of the time, is something that I've noticed. But as well as like a lot of deepest truths do make people uncomfortable, but only to choose to ignore it, or to those who are running from accepting those uncomfortable truths. And so yeah, today I just want to challenge like the common perception of death and try to figure out whether or not how we move about that is helping or hindering us in our day-to-day lives. And then we'll go to the next one. But yeah, so the common perception of death, like I said, was that from a young age, we're taught to get comfortable with this idea of death and accept it as a certainty because that's the one thing in this life that we can be sure of. So we might hear things growing up like life is too short, you only get one mind, body, and soul, so use it wisely, live today as if it was your last. But I feel like even with this understanding sometimes, many of us might still fear death or develop some sort of like an aversion towards it. And I know personally, for myself, I had always felt terrified of the idea of death. And so I would go down rabbit holes like spiraling, trying to ease that anxiety that I felt at the thought of my own time coming, or even worse, having to lose or live my family and friends. So usually whenever I would feel this anxiety and I would be spiraling, I would start to convince my mind and my body that it was actually happening in real time, that I was losing like my brother or my friend or whatever the case was. And it was just a very suffocating feeling. So I would just kind of shake my head and tell myself, it's not real, it's not real. And I do everything to distract from like even considering that type of reality. But the thing is that it can be real and it will be eventually. And so I kind of just started to question myself a little bit more about that and try to figure out what was at the root of that fear. And we'll discuss that a little bit more in the next slide. Okay. So I just thought to myself, I was like, okay, why am I so scared of death? Like, this is something that I've known from a young age. It's not anything that I can control. Everybody has their time. Why am I so afraid of it? And if I'm so afraid, why am I sitting in bed? Like, what am I gaining from sitting in bed, worrying about my friends and my family, or just not interacting with people because I'm scared of getting close to them and losing them? And so I started to dig a little deeper, and I realized, I was like, is it really that I'm afraid of death, or was it something else? And I realized that I wasn't necessarily scared of dying. What I was afraid of was not living. I was afraid of not reaching my full potential, not checking things off my to-do list, not pursuing my dreams and my passions, nurturing my connections and things like that. Just overall passing on before I felt that I was truly happy and content. And so I realized that we fear death because we crave life. We crave that connection. And this is kind of why I'm going to be referencing the untethered soul again today, and how I kind of started to shift that perspective a little bit in the next slide. Okay, so when I first had read this chapter about death last year, I kind of felt as if my brain was almost expanding. I was like, wow, my perspective, I hadn't ever seen death as a teacher. And that was what Michael was referring to in the book, is that it offered me a new way of thinking about life and death as a whole, because I was now seeing it as not something to fear or dread or avoid, but instead that can teach me how to move through life to cultivate like a more fulfilling life for me and my loved ones. And so I did understand this when I was first reading the book, but for me, usually, I don't know if anyone can relate, sometimes I can understand a certain concept. It takes me experiencing it firsthand before it actually clicks in my brain. And so I might have understood this perspective whenever I was reading it at first, but I felt like, you know, you get caught in the autopilot of things and life gets busy and you might not start living that truth. And so I didn't fully understand it, I think, until I had experienced like a sudden unexpected loss that I'm going to just share a little bit about my experience in the next slide. So I lost my dear friend Jolie last year in October. She was a beautiful soul. She'd always been there for me since I was young. And so losing her at 22 really shook my world, because I never really imagined a life without her in it. She was a close friend, but more like a sister. And so I just really didn't know how to move forward with that. We made so many plans, all the plans that you would make with your best friends and things like that. And so I was grieving, but it felt like it was in a different way because I had grieved family members before Jolie. But I think the way that I prepared myself for death was under the false pretense that is to be expected. Because I think whenever people pass of old age or of terminal illness, uh, in some sort of kind of it. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't make the hurt any less. Sort of start to like mentally trick your brain into thinking that you have that time to prepare yourself with everyone else. And so this was an illusion that I hadn't realized because people pass at any age, at any time. They pass in their cars driving, they pass running errands, they pass eating, anything that you're doing at any moment. There's probably someone somewhere else that's past doing the same thing. And I know that we are lucky enough in some circumstances to be able to have some moments with our loved ones before they pass so we can try and cultivate some sort of acceptance, but it isn't in all circumstances. And I don't think that I had prepared myself for that. And the only difference between the fact that, people are passing at any age and any time is the fact that it's not happening to you or around you at that moment. I think that it gets very easy sometimes to think that you're the exception until it's your own time to grieve. And so this is part of why I struggled a lot after Jolie. I know that I just really wanted to understand. And so if I can't make sense of something in my head, like even if I have to make up something to make it make sense, it's really hard for me to move forward. And so because of this, I laid dormant for months in my pain and in my grief, just kind of questioning the whys. I would ask myself, why her? Why now? Why like this? It was just a bunch of why? And I wasted so much time trying to figure out the why instead of accepting what is. Because, for example, if God had sent me a note via messenger pigeon today to tell me exactly why Jolie's time was now, it wouldn't have changed anything. The only difference is now I know why, but she would still be gone. It's that connection that I'm craving. And so our emotions make us human. But they also have the ability to cloud our perspectives. And I was so emotionally connected through my grief that I could not necessarily see the whole of life as a whole. I think, okay, so for instance, let's say whenever you hear a stranger passes or somebody you're not very close to, they tell you about somebody that had passed. You might feel sad or empathetic for the person, but you aren't personally impacted. Why is that? Somebody's mom, somebody's brother, somebody's best friend, all of those people's lives are crashing down while yours continues. And this is because you're disconnected, because that grief and that loss hasn't touched your bubble yet. And so I was realizing that grief is the price that you have to pay for loving people. And in the midst of that grief, sometimes you forget about the love. You can get caught in a cycle of pain that skews your entire outlook on life. And this is why many people get caught in such dangerous mindsets when they're grieving, because they're so emotionally connected. But I couldn't really see any of this in the moment until I started getting some grief, which I'll explain in the next slide. So as the months were going by and I was starting to gain some clarity in my grief, I revisited the chapter 17 in the book of the Untethered Soul that I had read previously last year. And it was almost as if I was starting to see things clearly. Things didn't look as blurry anymore. It felt as though I had put glasses on for the first time in my life and I was starting to see clearly. As though experiencing what I'd experienced, and then also hearing all the things that I'd heard from people growing up about life, it was all starting to click, and I felt that I was given a new lens to view life and death as a whole. So I was thinking to myself, I understand it now. What comes next? Use this new prescription in the real world, and what would that look like? So we're going to transition to mortality, because now I was very hyper aware of our mortality. Okay, so this actually brings everyone to just while I. All right. So I want you guys to imagine that if an angel whispered to you today and said, tie your loose ends, straighten your affairs, you won't wake from your sleep tonight, you're coming to me. I want you guys to ponder on this scenario for a second. Think about any initial thoughts you would think, any feelings, what it is that you would do or feel inclined to do. And I'll repeat one more time. Tie your loose ends, straighten your affairs. You won't wake from your sleep tonight. You're coming to me. Okay, you guys can kindly open your eyes now. And I know I'm gonna call out 2 brave volunteers again, just to share your immediate thoughts, nothing too crazy or anything like that. If I could have any volunteers, that would be amazing. Okay, Mommy, you're up. What were your immediate thoughts? You're not ready? Yeah, if you were told today was your last day and you're like, okay, I just have 24 hours, that's it. Okay. Celine?
Um, I would have to. Okay. I would have to say I would probably run to my parents, screaming and crying.
Very honest answer, yeah. So I completely agree. Those were exactly my first thoughts too. Like I was immediately thinking just to reject all of it. I kept thinking, I'm not ready yet, I'm not ready yet, I need more time. I kept saying I needed more time. And what I was thinking is, you know what Death would have said to me? He would have been like, I've given you 21 years this whole time, 21 years. I've even given you 365 days this year alone. What have you been doing with all this time? I might be thinking something like, I don't know, like I didn't think it mattered. Death is gonna say, well, that's a pretty great thing to say about your life, isn't it? And so when I was thinking this, I was like, wow, this makes a lot of sense. I was starting to understand it a lot more. I was starting to feel the gears shift in my brain, because whenever I put life and death in this circumstance, without it actually even happening, just the mere thought of I have no time, and if this were to come today, now I'm starting to think about all of the things that I'm dragging my feet on that truly do matter to me. And so I think over time, it just kind of started to slip into autopilot because life gets busy, and eventually became background noise. But I think after Julie had passed, I started to find myself and catch myself naturally thinking this way. And I would just see myself pause and observe my daily thoughts, patterns, and my actions. I would realize how often I would procrastinate on things that mattered to me, whether it was spending time with the people that I love, because I assume that they're always gonna be there, because they have always been there. I might put off uncomfortable conversations because of my own ego, like maybe I'm upset at them, or just out of pure avoidance for uncomfortable conversations. And so I just caught myself living on autopilot and forgetting that the entire point of life was to enjoy it. So I thought, how can I expect to live a certain life if I'm not actively striving for it? It's as if I thought everything that I wanted was just going to fall onto my front porch or in my lap. If I'm not actively striving for the things that I want, if I'm not exploring my interests, nurturing my connections, chasing my dreams and goals, I just started to feel so guilty now that I was hyper aware of this. And so this was more of a wake-up call for me. I felt very guilty because something that I've learned recently is that knowledge does not equal power. And a lot of people think that knowledge equals power. And this was my misconception as well, because the execution of knowledge is power. It doesn't matter how much you know. It doesn't matter the perspective that you can see and understand if you aren't doing anything with that. Because now you're just collecting things in your memory bank. Now you can maybe understand a different perspective, but what is the point if you're not actively living that truth? So now I'm feeling really guilty because it's like, okay, I kind of almost wish that I was ignorant, because at least, like, I don't know if you've ever seen like happy ignorant people, like just blissfully ignorant, and they're just like la la la. And so I was like, I wish I could go back to that, because now that I could see this perspective differently, I feel so guilty for still resorting back to doing the same things or the same habits and not doing anything about that. And so, for example, I want to say that I've always had a dream of traveling and, just like experiencing new cultures, new sites and things like that. But I think I would always just push it off for some reason. I would find myself instead just scrolling through videos of other people traveling. I would hear a bunch of stories about people's trips, and I would sit there wishing that it was me, except I would continue to make excuses for why it couldn't be me. I would say things like, I'm broke, and then when my paycheck comes in, I either spend it on trivial things or I don't save any of it. I push it to an unknown date for when I think I'll be ready. I will say things like, oh, I will start traveling when I get a big girl job. I'll start traveling when I get my first degree. I'll start traveling whenever I settle down. It was just when I in my head, instead of realizing that everything that I needed and wanted was within my reach. I just needed to extend my arm. So I was talking to myself, and I was like, Angel, if you want to travel the world, why are you putting it off as if tomorrow is planned or promised? Why aren't you making a plan? Take small steps. Stop thinking about doing it and just do it. For every excuse that I had for why I wasn't living my life fully, there was a solution. But every time that I didn't set myself up for success, I was setting myself up to fail. And that's something that I didn't realize. So I ask you guys, like, what is it that you want to do? Is there anything you're holding back? Is there a book you're waiting to put out? Do you think that you're too old or you don't have enough time? These are the questions that I started to ask myself, and I just felt like a fire lit under me after that. And so I'll transition into just living fully in the present. The goal and the aim is to reach a place whereby if you were told today that it was your last, you would feel content. You wouldn't feel distraught. You wouldn't be panicking, because you had already spent every single day up until that moment living fully, living life to your fullest potential, showing up for yourself and for others, being authentic. If you're already doing these things in your day-to-day life, you won't feel distraught at just like the thought of your time coming sooner than you anticipated. And so, as Ecclesiastes 8:15 says, I commend joy, for man has nothing better under the sun but to eat and drink and be joyful. For this will go with him in this toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun. And we'll transition in a little bit to the power of perspective. Okay, so death becomes our greatest teacher only whenever we shift our perspective towards it. It reminds us to live fully, love deeply, and to appreciate each and every moment. Because sometimes we will forget about these things in our day-to-day lives when everything gets busy and everyone gets caught up with their own stuff. So today I find myself always imagining that if the person I'm interacting with or any of my loved ones, if this were to be my last conversation with them, or if this were to be the last time that I see them, except unlike the past where I would shake the thoughts away and I would avert from that thought or I would distract myself from it, I instead find myself pausing and reminding myself to remain present. Because when faced with the thought that this could be the last conversation with somebody that I love, or even if it's a stranger, I'm now more prompted to say all of the things that I've wanted to say, to not push everything off to Thanksgiving or like a year or two later on because I assume that our time is infinite. We have the tendency to only think about doing certain things until people pass. We see this a lot in media with like rappers and musical artists. A lot of the time they don't gain this popularity until they pass on. And that's because now people are paying attention. Now the stakes are raised. And so I thought if we don't see death as our teacher, then we begin to take the people we love for granted without even realizing it. We start to think, okay, they'll be here today, they'll be here tomorrow, the day after that, the week after that, years after that. And so this is why I had a lot of regrets when Jolie had passed. I had thought things like, I should have spent more time with her. I shouldn't have like waited till specific holidays and events like that. I should have went to UTA with her so we could go to school together. I should have moved in with her last year. I should have verbally expressed my affection more to her so she knew how much she meant to me. A lot of just like shoulda, coulda, woulda in my head, and it just kept me in a harmful state of mind and brought me even lower than I already was. So I started to replace I should have with now I will. Instead of saying, I should have done this, I'm now saying, now I'll do this. Instead of saying, I should have known better, now I'm saying, now I know better. Because the fool who keeps making the same mistake. So also, something I notice is a lot of people, like whenever we have a loved one that passes, they tell you a lot to carry that person's love with you through your life. They tell you, carry their love, take what you've learned from them and put that into your life. But I think that we forget that you can't only take the love. You have to take the regret too. You have to take the guilt. You have to take everything that the loss of life has shown you and thrust that into the most meaningful parts of your life. That is exactly how we use death as our greatest teacher. We can't only take the love, because whenever we start using that regret and the guilt that we feel and doing better for the connections that we still have here today, whenever they do pass, we will be grieving that person, not all the things we wish we could have said, we wish we would have done, because we knew that we showed up every day authentically and we showed up for them and we did all we could, and it's just God's plan. So I want you guys to ask yourself, how much love could you give the ones that you love, knowing that it would be the last time that you'd get to be with them? Now I want you to think about what it would be like if you were to live like that every moment with everyone. This message isn't meant to scare you. I don't think that this mindset towards death is morbid. I think it's empowering. Amen. It gives life meaning by reminding you to live intentionally. So we're going to transition into the hidden trails in your mind. So with reflecting on mortality and like the power that it gives us through perspective, I'm starting to see how much our internal reality will shape our external and our outside world. But before I get into that, I do want to break down just a little bit of neuroscience and break down neural pathways with you. So I like to think of neural pathways in our nervous system as trails, like walking trails or hike trails. I'm going to try not to get too off topic with these next few slides. But I'm going to use my brother, Junior, as an example because he likes hiking. So let's say that Junior is bored of all of his old trails and he decides that he wants to go to a new forest. And so Junior starts to go to this new forest. It's not very common. There's not already a well-worn-in trail because nobody frequents that area. So Junior starts on his first hike for there. It's very faint. It's kind of hard to follow. So Junior starts just cutting all the branches, cutting all the grass, just to create a pathway for him to go on his hike. By the end of his first hike, Junior has now created a well-worn pathway. Fast forward a month later, Junior gets busy. We know how life gets. He wasn't able to go back to that new forest in the past month. So he returns again, except now that he's found, his trail is gone. All the plants have ever grown. He has to start again. So he goes on his second hike, doing the same thing, cutting down branches, making a way for his path as the soil is like compressing under his feet. And so he does this a few times every week. He starts frequenting that same trail a few times every single week. And over time, nature begins to acclimate, and he now has a well-worn-in trail. This is essentially how neural pathways work in our brain, in our mind. They're kind of like highways in our nervous system that will send messages to our brain so they know that what is happening, and our body knows what to do. But these neural pathways in our brain are strengthened over time by our experiences, kind of like a form of conditioning. This is why people say practice makes perfect, because if you're practicing something, eventually, over time, you're going to increase your speed and efficiency at doing that certain activity. So just like Junior's repeated hikes down that trail, our brains develop these well-worn pathways through like repeated habits, thoughts, and experiences. But the thing is, the interesting part is that a lot of these pathways operate automatically without us even realizing. And this is otherwise known as like our subconscious mind. I put a photo up there just so you have a little bit of a visual, because we are aware of a very small percent of our mind. The rest of it is subconscious, and that is kind of just to give you a visual as how we're skimming the surface of what we're aware of. The conscious mind is like our rational part of our brain. So it's responsible for like decision-making, logical and critical thinking, planning. And whereas our subconscious mind is the hidden part of our brain. So this is responsible for like all of our unconscious processes, which would be things like breathing, telling your heart to beat, our emotional reactions, our beliefs, and long-term memory. And so every time that we have a conscious thought, there's an emotion attached to that. And those emotions will send an impression in our subconscious. Those impressions will strengthen over time based on what we give our energy to, and they'll begin to have an effect on our behavior without us being aware of it most of the time. So giving you an example, I guess like this would be why Bethany, like your friend Bethany, will keep going back to an ex that didn't treat her well, even though she knows her worth. This might be why Charlie is now afraid of crowded spaces, because the first time that he had performed at, like done public speaking, he had a panic attack. So now he just completely avoids that. Our subconscious remembers everything, even whenever we don't realize it. So when you tell yourself things like you're joking, like, oh, I'm so stupid, oh, I missed this, your brain is listening to you. And this is something that I didn't realize, that because that completely will change our perspective and how we move about life. This is exactly why people will tell you to talk to yourself like a loved one. Because if you are telling yourself, oh, I love you every day, you're pouring into yourself, you look in the mirror, eventually your brain is gonna be like, you know what? This is Angel, that's my friend. We don't put Angel down. Like, I love Angel, you know? But if you're saying things like, oh, I'm dumb, or things like that, it's eventually going to click into your subconscious brain. And so I kind of want to just walk y'all really quick through this process of how our inner worlds will impact our outer world. On the next slide. So our thoughts will create our feelings will create our beliefs, which then result in our actions. To give y'all a little rundown of this, I'll give y'all another example. Let's say that I've always been passionate about entrepreneurship and I wanted to start a business, but I've always kind of just pushed it off, or I never thought that I would be able to have a good enough business idea. And so one day I have a new idea that pops up and I'm like, okay, I have all this dopamine, all these good thoughts, I'm feeling good, I'm hyped. I wanna figure this out before somebody else gets to my idea first. So I hop on the computer, I'm researching a bunch, except I start to encounter some obstacles. There's things like maybe financial problems or competition, heavy workload. So I might have a random thought that's just like, oh, this is too hard for me. Oh, I can't do this. And so now those thoughts will create feelings if I continue to engage with them and give them energy. I could have just ignored it and been like, no, yeah, I can do this, I'll keep going. And so those thoughts will become feelings, and now I'm feeling a little anxious. I'm a little uneasy. At first, I started off really excited, pumped up about starting this new business idea. Now I'm feeling a little helpless, overwhelmed, anxious, a little shameful maybe. And so now I'm starting to think things like, maybe I'm not good enough. Why am I trying? I'll probably just fail anyways, or I'll fail if I don't anyways. I'll fail if I try, fail if I don't. And so these will result in my actions and my behavior. Now I'm not trying. I grow complacent. I give up before I even try. And the thing is that we can't control which areas of our life that these beliefs seep into. It may have started with just my professional career, but now it's seeping into other areas of my life without realizing it. Now I'm doubting myself in relationships because I don't feel adequate. Now I'm overly sensitive to criticism or opinions of other people. Now I might be avoiding new social connections or making friends because I think they don't feel the same way I do. Like I'm not good enough or adequate enough to be that. We don't get what we want in life. We get what we believe. The person who thinks that he can and the person that thinks that he can't are both right, is something that I'm realizing. If I think I can't do something, then the world is going to show me exactly why I can't. They're going to throw all of that back in my face, and I'm just going to be like, okay, well, but if I know that I can do something, then I'm going to accept all these opportunities because I know I deserve it. I know I can do it. I know I'm capable. You won't be able to reach the things that you want in life without becoming the person that can do that thing, is what I realized. And so this change, it comes from within us. The genuine desire to live your life the way that you want to has to come from the conscious part of our brains. We have to make that effort. We have to be intentional. We have to look within ourselves and figure out what it is that is holding us back from living fully and showing up and being authentic. God gave everybody a purpose, but it's up to you to believe it. Amen. So I know that this is a lot easier said than done. So I just kind of want to discuss like what could be some steps forward with living like a life with intention. Okay. So firstly, I want you to get in the habit of questioning yourself. This isn't for overthinkers. We're not going to overanalyze everything. Question yourself healthily. Am I practicing daily habits that align with my goals? Am I actively working towards the life that I want? Or am I waiting for the perfect moment for something? Am I making excuses? And is there something else going on? Because the beautiful thing about our minds is its ability to adapt and create new neural pathways. Neuroplasticity. So I say this to my friends a lot, is that we can't control the cards that we're dealt with, but the only thing that we can control is how we choose to play those cards that we're given. Depending on what it is that we put our energy towards and the perspective that we choose to adopt. I want you guys to reflect on the thoughts and feelings that came up for you whenever I told you about the scenario with the angel. Sit with those thoughts, but you need to start moving after that. You need to make a plan, practice your craft, take intentional steps today, whatever that looks like. I'm gonna say gratitude journal, because gratitude, you have to work on practicing seeing the good in life. You have to work on practicing seeing the things that you already have, because whenever we're so focused on everything that's going wrong and we're stuck in a lack mindset, we completely lose sight of the entire point of life. And so try and keep a gratitude journal. That's what I'm trying to do. Write 3 things every day. You can't recycle the same thing from yesterday or the day before that. You have to look for something every single day that you are grateful for. And this will show you to keep, this will kind of show you how to shift that perspective and not get so stuck in a different one. Another thing is affirmations. I know it's corny. I used to think that they were the corniest myth as well, but then again, I wouldn't even stick with it for like 3 days. So, but they can work, and they do work. You just have to be consistent. A lot of people say it takes 27 days to build a new habit. One of my favorite affirmations, I will say, is that I can do hard things. I tell myself this because if I believe that I can't do hard things, every time a hard thing comes in my face, I'm just gonna be like, okay, give it to the next person. I'm not doing that. I can't do it. But if I'm telling myself that I can do hard things, I'm validating that this is a hard thing, but I'm also telling myself that I'm capable of doing that. Another thing would also be therapy or grief counseling. And another thing I want to say is that these perspectives or this message that I'm giving you is something that you have to marry. Like, you have to marry this new thought pattern. It's going to take some people a few more hikes up to make new trails in their brain. It's going to be uncomfortable at first. But on the other side of that discomfort is the part of you that wants to live freely. It's the part of you that sees your purpose and your desires and wants to dance authentically through the world. And I know that there's a lot of unknowns in this lifetime, but I think that there's comfort in knowing that while we're limited, we're also free. So as we bring the service to a close, I want to say that if you're struggling with grief, don't lose hope. Hope isn't a feeling, it's a skill. It's something that you have to practice and be intentional at every day. You have to choose to keep that faith. Hope isn't just going to find you. If you need to reach out, it takes a village. It genuinely does. You can reach out to pastor. You can reach out to the church leaders. You can reach out to me. I'm sure lots of your neighbors here would be there for you as a support system as well. And remember that God heals and cares, so keep praying. But one more thing. Before I let y'all go, I just kind of wanted to introduce this hourglass. So this hourglass, it serves as a simple reminder of how fleeting our time really is. The sand in the hourglass slowly slips away, much like our days, our months, our years. And we can't control how fast or how slow the sand falls. The only thing we can control is what we do with the little time that we have left. So I'm going to flip this over. Each grain of sand represents our moments in our lives, precious, but irretrievable once they're gone. So this is a reminder that life is short, unpredictable, and often slipping away before we even realize it. So I leave you with this image, that the sand is always falling. The question is, will we spend our moments in fear, procrastination, and regret, or will we bask in the present moment knowing that every grain counts? The choice is your own, and time waits for no one. But until then, I'll be waiting for the day that Jesus calls my name.